All right, so we're here for a review of Mickey 17. Which one of you would like to give a quick, I guess, overview? What's this movie about?
Uh, that's an interesting question. Uh, I was excited about seeing it based off of just the trailer, and then it kept getting pushed in terms of its release date. But I guess it is a irreverent, dark comedy sci-fi, and it's supposed to be a political satire or socio-political satire as well. So
Yeah, I've heard some of that. So the plot line that's given on IMDb is that it's a human expedition to colonize space, and Mickey 17, who's a so-called expendable employee, is sent to explore an ice planet. So essentially, right, here's a human that they 3D print over and over again, and they use him to do different experiments to ensure the safety of the rest of the crew, supposedly prior to getting to some planet in which they hope to colonize. Right.
yeah,
Um,
synopsis, gotcha.
all right, so let's bounce around a little bit as we do here. We open up to Mickey. Let's just first get first takes on just Mickey as a character in general. Mickey 17.
Yeah.
Spoilers as we do here. There's multiple Mickeys, of course. Mickey 17 is the main character. Later on, there's a Mickey 18, but Mickey 17, our main guy.
I
All
think
right.
I could relate more to Mickey 18.
You could what?
I could relate more to
Oh,
Mickey
yeah.
18
Why is that?
because he's tired of the dumb shit and always being the one catching the short end of the stick. Even if you sign on as the expendable, doesn't mean you shouldn't be treated with dignity and courtesy and whatnot. And you know, anyway, I didn't take the movie as an overly deep philosophical thinker. I just looked at it as a fun B grade movie, and I enjoyed it. But quite honestly, I don't have the thank you for dinner, sir. Hey, no, screw you, man. I'd rather put a bullet in him, just like Mickey 18 wanted to.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you in terms of the way I took this movie. I saw it twice. I almost didn't watch this because I had seen some other reviews where people were talking about it, and I'm glad I watched it because they were just flat out wrong. I was hearing a whole lot of political, philosophical bullshit out there relating it. I don't know how some, and it's from people that I respect a lot of times with their reviews, but I think they are so far gone sometimes. They they're missing out on a lot of stuff because everything is the boogeyman around the corner for them. Because, for example, the the main villain, quote unquote, for a lot of people was seen as Trump in some way, and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, anyway, bringing it back. So yeah, Mickey 17. He's James. What was your
My
J3? What was
initial
your
my
thing
initial
about him?
take on him.
Yeah.
My initial take on the character was, God, I'm gonna hate this. Uh, just because one, it's Robert Pattinson, but I had to separate myself from that, and I'll talk about that later, as far as what I thought. But as far as the character, I thought my my initial take on him, they tied it into the whole loan shark, and he had to get off the planet because he owed money and all that. I think that was wasted, but whatever. To me, he's just representative of just the dejected, despondent masses. He's kind of an individual because if you remember, like Dad said, he should at least be treated with some dignity and respect. And if you remember when there's the massive line of people going up the walkway to apply
Mm-hmm.
for this colonization trip, when he puts it in, the lady's completely aghast and shocked by the fact that he put expendable. So this is showing that he's the only person out of an entire planet of people trying to get off a dying planet um, that has put in for this job. So he's in that moment for me. This was an individual or a character that had zero self worth, or at least he felt that he was beyond redemption for whatever reason, and we find that out later.
Yeah, so I'm glad you pointed that out because that was exactly what I was gonna say. I understand kind of that perspective of maybe treating him with respect or anything because yeah, he's literally the only guy that signed up for this job, right?
Yeah.
With that being said, it kind of goes, your end point there might kind of lend some credence as to why you wouldn't, right? Well, he's a loser who has no other options. Who gives a shit how we treat him, right? So it's not like there's any repercussions for that. That being said, I thought the whole loan shark idea, like I thought that was pointless. There was no reason for that. Everybody's trying to leave for whatever. What's the matter? His character is a loser character, right?
Yeah.
He seems to, honestly, even in the way he speaks, he seems to be almost a bit slow, right?
You know what? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's another point. My initial thought about him, Morty from Rick and Morty.
Yeah.
He's effectively for Mickey 17. That was like a live action affectation of the cartoon Morty, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good representation or analogy, because he seems like he's probably a decent person, but he's very easily taken advantage of. He's not all that bright. Even if he tries to do good, he probably makes bad decisions, so on and so forth, to where, he's just a loser. So it's kind of hard to relate to him in a lot of ways, because I think his cognitive abilities probably are quite a bit lower to have gotten him into that point. But in any case, we get him off planet and everything, and everybody's kind of surprised that anybody would take on this role, but he does it. And this is where I would say, and I kind of want to get into the weeds here a little bit, things go awry whenever it comes to the sci-fi aspect of this. Again, I thought it was a good movie and everything, but conceptually it didn't make a lot of sense, right? First of all, if you can 3D print people, why does anybody not, like, you could do that to anybody? Right.
Not only that, but obviously your disease, your disease prevention or disease treatment, all these things with the ability to truly print off an exact organic replica of humans or humans themselves. And why isn't all of this shit already fixed to where you don't have the need for all this medical experimentation?
Exactly. And I don't recall, so maybe one of you can fill me in. The whole premise as to what creates the issue in this movie is that you are not supposed to allow, what do they call them? Replicas, duplicates, multiples. Okay, right.
Because one of the creators, Monarca, created multiple versions of himself, unbeknownst to the world
and
at
was
large,
committing crimes, right?
Right, and committing crimes in multiple locations, and they found it out because he had an alibi, even though he matched the exact what's the word, description that was given of the person that committed the crimes. And then they found later, I can't remember, they came into a house, and that's what it was. They came to his house and discovered them both there, and then they found out that there was the third.
So and that's where I'm glad that that's what it was, because I kind of forgotten, but that makes it even more so to my point, in the fact that there's no medical reason as to why not to do this. There's no moral or ethical reason. It's more so a lawful type of thing, as we might not be able to keep track, right? But you're dying of cancer, you're dying of some terminal illness. Hey, why don't we just 3D print you and fix you up, be done with you, type of thing, right? Or maybe not even that. We have your DNA and your memories. You could keep yourself on board to at a certain point if you did want to be printed. Again, there's no issues to that. Their whole basis as to not allowing it was more so hey, we don't want people committing crimes, which, like, twins could do, right?
Well, they also don't, right, and they also don't talk about the fact that we already have CRISPR and technology such as this. Like, you telling me that you're this far advanced into the future to where you can mass colonize distant planets, and you haven't mastered gene editing? Like, come on.
Well, that's what I thought was kind of cool with the machine in which they're using, right? It's a whole bunch of more organic material and stuff like that. I'd even made a note, right?
That was cool. That was
cool. Yeah. It's funny because it's such an interesting concept, and it's kind of why I like it. But the idea, right, is from a chemistry standpoint, it should be the easiest thing in the world to create a human, right? I mean, like, we know how much carbon you need, how much nitrogen, how much oxygen, all this type of stuff, right? So chemistry wise, like, it's pretty simple, but it's not.
That's where you get into the philosophical weeds, because what is a human? The soul, the spirit, the memories, the experiences, and
Well, I'm just saying, like, even from a printing standpoint, it's like, we might know the structure and all that, but we still can't necessarily. We are able to 3D print some organs and things like that currently. I mean, we're definitely making the advances, but the idea you're going to be able to do that, and honestly, right, the the consciousness aspect of it, the memory aspect of it. That's the most complex. And I don't understand why they used a freaking brick, like a literal brick, as their.
I still haven't been able to glean just from ruminating on it.
What a
Why it
weird.
was that? Yeah, it was so weird. And the fact that it was grooved and it wasn't even a nice new brick. It was.
That's what I mean. Like it's this chunky old looking brick that somehow these wires going
yeah.
into it that are like sucking whatever
Oh,
fluids out and everything. I didn't get it.
and I also want to point out that we haven't talked about Mickey 18 yet. And I also want to say one thing before we jump in deeper in weeds that reverts back to the initial take on Mickey. And this has to do with Mickey 17 from, I don't deign to know what the director's vision was or what he was trying to represent, but maybe this is my personal experience right now speaking. But the other thing that we talked about the fact that he may not have the highest intelligence, he's the proverbial loser, or whatever. But there's a saying in our field: we're out here building America, and people would be surprised to find out how many people that are actually keeping the lights on and the heat on for people. That they may not be the most intelligent from a scholastic perspective. They may seem underwhelming whenever it comes to any type of observable features that make them extraordinary. But when you get them in their milieu, whether that's bending tubing for natural gas regulation systems or excavation and compaction, et cetera, all the various things that the trades entail, some of these people are absolute wizards. They're artists at what they do. But and with Mickey, one, he represented to me from the representative standpoint of corporations using fodder. That's quite literally what the workforce is to many of these corporations. They are fodder. And then with Mickey, the one thing I don't want to take away from him is they did a lot of experimentation in which his intelligence or anything had nothing to do with it besides observing back to them things he was experiencing when he could be verbal. But they also sent him out to do tasks, so he at least had the wherewithal, knowledge, and general functionality to go do certain things.
All right, I have to stop that because, I mean, I agree with you, everything that you said. But as I was thinking about it as it applies to Mickey, I don't see it, right? Like even when they sent him out to do stuff, it wasn't to do those things.
Yeah. Well,
hey,
that's
go do a spacewalk. Go fix this. Oh, by the way, no, that wasn't really what we sent you out to do. It was
here for
you're just being
radiation.
exposed to massive amounts of radiation, right?
All right.
Or this or that or the other. Even whenever he's eating at dinner later on in the movie, right? Like,
oh yeah, that was the worst, dude.
Yeah, we'll get to that, but no, I definitely agree to you with you, right? And I was thinking even like, okay, well, what might Mickey bring to the table? What's his special skill, right? And I'll ask you this. So if somebody's good at something, whether naturally or learned, if they're unintentionally, pardon me, if they are unintentionally good at said thing, where does that fall within, I guess, what you were talking about, right? Because the only thing I could see Mickey being maybe somewhat good at, and that's even questionable, is personality, being able to connect with people. And even that I would say is questionable, but also I don't think it's intentional, right? So whether or not he has any charisma or he's endearing or anything like that, it's not as if he's like trying to be. He's just kind of the little retard that people pat on the head and it's like, yeah, I mean,
he's Morty.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how much he brings. I was going to say though, because I was thinking about this too, and I was curious on your all's perspective is he might not be. I think a lot of what's going on with him, we hear it a little bit in the movie is maybe he's not lower functioning or any of that, but he's definitely downtrodden and whatnot. And he relates a lot of it back to some childhood trauma that he had where he believes that he killed his parents.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was his mom and dad, but definitely his mother, maybe mother and brother or something like that. But it was his family that he ended up killing. They were in a car. He was young. He saw a pretty shiny red button and he pressed the red button. Which, first of all, the main thing that I'm thinking is, what did that button do that killed them?
Well, remember, we find out later on that his other self says, they have the heart to heart, and it's, you didn't cause that. That was a defect. You know that. And then remember, when they're going out to die, it comes up again, and he says, stop that. And this is where this was actually a rather poignant point in the film, because it's the first time where there's a recognition that they're the same. And that is when they're about to go out with the vests on, he says to him, whatever it was, that wasn't your fault. He either says, I've been telling you that, or I've always told you that.
Yeah.
And he says, I have always told you that. Not you've always known, not you've known. I have always told you that, or I've
Which,
been
what would
telling
you
you.
say? That's a representation of his conscious. Mickey 18 is supposed to be that other
No,
part of
I
his
don't.
consciousness.
Well, not only the fact that it's the other part of the yeah. I think that's
Because it was
where
saying, I told you. Well, they weren't
right,
together, right? But
right. They
I
weren't
was
right.
part of you.
Right, they are the same, in as much as that's where they lost out on the ability to delve, in my opinion, more into the philosophical questions of what it is to be human, what is it to be multiple in this, and where does the human spirit, soul, whatever you want to call it, where does consciousness and a printed organism, where's that separation, especially whenever we have it in the matter of duplicated clones. And then there's the memory, the passing over from the brick. That was just really interesting to me, because I was waiting for it, in terms of like, when are they going to acknowledge the fact that, in my opinion, this is supposed to be just a representation of the latent, uh, aspects of the Mickey 17 that we're seeing. Basically, maybe a represented alternate trajectory had the accident not happened.
Right.
Something.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I guess I'm a little more base. I think that if there were two of me, the first thing I would want to do is find a Masha and do a threesome. So sorry,
That's what you
I missed
wanted.
out on all the philosophical shit and just go for the vulgar base thing.
Yeah, unless again, I didn't really understand why multiples were such a big deal. Maybe up in space and whatnot, but anyway, I guess continuing on. So ultimately, what's happening as they're flying to colonize this new planet is that Mickey's being experimented on, their very first Mickey, and then they keep printing. He keeps dying in different ways. Whether it's trying to find a vaccine for something, whether it's exposure to radiation, whether it's trying to see if a planet's habitable with its oxygen, what have you. And eventually we land on Mickey 17. And throughout that time, he becomes intimate. He gets a relationship with one of the security personnel, Nasha, I believe. And they're together and doing their thing. Then they get to a planet where they're doing some type of expedition out on it. I don't think this was the planet they were trying to get to, but they were on this planet. They were doing an expedition. A bunch of these creatures that look like tardigrades
That's exactly
come
what
out.
they look like.
Yeah, they come out.
They look like huge water bears.
Yeah, these massive creatures, they come out. I think one of the personnel may have gotten killed. I don't know. Anyway, Mickey ends up getting stranded there in an ice ravine type thing, and the rest of the crew leaves. Right? Is that what happened?
No, only one guy came down, Timo, and he's like, "Oh, you're still alive."
Yeah,
And
it's supposed to
instead
be
of
his best
rescuing
friend.
him, even though he was still alive, just like, well, die, and we'll print you out tomorrow.
But the reason they came down, it was because the whole crew got away except for like him or whatever, right?
Well, no, when he fell into that thing, they only came down to retrieve the rifle.
I know, but what got him trapped down there?
Yes, he was out. His job was to go and capture one of the alien life forms.
No,
And
not at that point.
No,
At that point, they didn't even know about him. At that point, he got into that crevasse because the snow cap underneath him gave way.
Yes, they did know about the.
Not at that point.
Here, hold on, guys.
Yes, they did, because the girl had died already.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, so everybody kind of had bits and pieces of it. So the expedition force went out. They came across the creatures. Woman ends up shooting. She ends up dying whenever the ice collapses on them. They all get out. They get back to the ship. They send Mickey back out to collect and capture one of these creatures. he gets out there and ends up getting stuck in the ravine. They come back and retrieve the weapon and leave him to die, basically. And this is where he meets the creatures for the first time, the queen bee, all that type of stuff. And while he's there and is presumed dead, they print out Mickey 18. And so these creatures, they get him back to the surface, basically saving him. And he makes his way back to the ship, and now there's Mickey 17 and Mickey 18. So let me ask, what were your takes on the creatures here on this planet?
Well, we've all said it or thought it. They're just big water bears, tardigrades, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked them. I thought they were awesome. Thought they were an interesting creature. I would have liked to have had more time delving into a little bit more of the, well, I mean, and again, that's where they kind of lost me as a sci-fi, because I get that they had the hive link and whatnot. We get that through whenever they kill the one baby and whatnot, but I would have liked to have learned a lot more about, what's the saliva or goo or whatever that they put all over the baby, and uh, the antenna type, the proboscis type thing that comes out. That it's some form of antenna, much akin to the Avatar's hair thing that links in with the trees and nature and all that stuff. So I would have liked to have known more about that, but I thought they were a really cool creature.
Yeah, it is cool to see that. So for those folks that aren't familiar, and forgive me, I'm not an expert or anything, but tardigrades they're microscopic in real life, but they are presumed to be able to, well, not presumed. We know that they can withstand the vacuum of space. They can interplanetary travel, and there's some thoughts that that's what some of the ideas as to how life came to planet Earth and possibly to other areas. So here on this planet, they're massive sized, but that's kind of a cool little homage, I guess, to the water bear, the tardigrade, in terms of interplanetary travel and living and everything like that. So yeah, there's millions of them. It would seem there are at least many of them. It looks like they have, like you mentioned, James, hive mind and everything. And anyway, they save Mickey. He gets back to the ship, and now there is both a 17 and an 18. And who wants to talk here as terms of what happens with 17 and 18, and your thoughts on 18?
Well, I found it completely interesting that they were so much the extremes of that one person's personality. So you've got this organically identical, printed with the same memories and all that, and one of them is a peacemaker who will say thank you for dinner to the guy that just about killed him, and the other one who is willing to kill his ex-best friend because of perceived slight that he's known through at least 17 other courses of life.
Yeah, that's where it would have been interesting from a philosophical exploration type of thing to see. It's like, okay, does the way DNA replicates, right? This is why we end up dying, is because over time there's eventually, like, it's not actually exact replica. Eventually there's minor changes here and there, right? And so if every time he's printed there's this stripping away maybe of what we might consider to be Mickey, to where it's actually condensing down maybe into what we know as 18, right? To where if you were to do it over and over, how much of that is playing? Because every time he's dying, right? Maybe there are these minor changes in his own mind of like, these people suck. They're just using me. I'm just cannon fodder, what have you. And so over time, that like pool builds up. At least this is the way I'm envisioning it, right? It builds up to where it's taking over more and more of his personality to eventually, yeah, that next print off is more of that, because every time it's been stripped away of what the original was.
I don't think that's what happened, because remember, it always strips. He might remember the death, but it said his body would come back that way. You're right, the memories come back, but you guys are forgetting a critical scene. When they were printing out 18, the one scientist was walking across and kicked the wires, and it unplugged one of the wires for a second, and he plugs it in.
That's a good point.
It wasn't that's the thing. It was not flawed software. It was operator error. that
Was that
created
just
this issue.
on? Are you sure that was just on 18?
Yeah.
To where they
Yeah.
just
I believe
hate
that
that.
was supposed, because in the book Mickey 7, that's what happens. Mickey 8 is different because of an error, if I'm not mistaken.
Hold on,
But
I'm gonna pause this.
yeah, check and see.
All right, we're back to recording. Okay, so we weren't. Okay, so we took a look at that, and there's definitely a scene where a cord gets kicked out, although it doesn't. We weren't able to pinpoint where that was. We're not going to waste time going through it all, but it doesn't look like it happened during Mickey 18, although it definitely could have contributed potentially as to why 17 and 18 may have been so different. In any case, whenever we were looking through that, we definitely, again, just saw some of the utter disregard, whether it was, not having the tables set up for the printing. They were throwing him down into the incinerator even whenever he was still alive, which is a bit bizarre that you wouldn't incinerate organic matter if you need the organic matter. That was actually just occurred to me. The one thing is, one of the doctors there, one of the scientists I really liked, right? She's the only one that also always shows some type of concern for Mickey. She actually does care in some way, shape, or form. And she's kind of a bit of a little, I don't know if you want to call her a hero or what, but she was a standout for me in the movie. I liked her a lot. I guess just for her humanity.
I have a point to make regarding something you just said regarding the disposing of organic matter. That was another question I had regarding the just the whole premise of that organic incinerator recycler system, is the fact that you have a finite amount of organic resources on this ship. And granted, yeah, you're recycling it, but everything degrades to a point where it can no longer be recycled. I think we can all see that in our day-to-day life when we go to the grocery store now and get a plastic bag. And, it's at the point where they've been recycled to where there's no structural integrity to these bags we're getting nowadays.
Yeah, I don't know what that would, I'm not a chemist, an engineer, anything like that. I wonder how that played out, right? Because theoretically, you're talking about elements, right? Which, yes, they're infinitely recyclable, at least from a theoretical standpoint.
Right, theoretically, but we're talking about a refining process that's stripping these elements from it's taking constituent parts from an existing whole. And we see this with what they're trying to do with the battery recycling now, with the rare earth mineral batteries and whatnot. Now, granted, can they be recycled? Yes, but at this point, there's so much loss that it's not cost effective. And no matter what, there's loss. So eventually you're going to run out, even though elements are in theory infinitely recyclable. Unless, of course, again, it's the future. So I'll suspend disbelief and imagine that while they haven't figured out genetic sequencing, they've figured out how to harness, atmospheric elements. They are traveling through space, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all the constituent parts you would need to create or make elements or compounds, I guess we could say they can get.
Well, I was in
But if
agreement
you
with
can do
you.
that, then why not just send a bunch of bricks and the material? That way you don't have to worry about feeding all these 4,000 people on the way there.
Well,
Just wait till you get
why,
there and print them out.
Why not replicate a bazillion apples, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you can print organic material.
And that's where I was going to agree, actually, is that, right? I mean, over time, it doesn't matter how efficient. No machine's 100% efficient, right? So eventually you would think that it's going to, you're going to lose some, whether it's breathing out carbon dioxide into the air, right? You're losing that. But it doesn't matter. Maybe that's their excuse as to why they only have one Mickey, right?
That's what I was about to
do this to everybody.
That's what I was about to say. Not only did they have one Mickey, but did anybody else find it odd that they only had one replicator?
Well, it said
because you only have one Mickey.
Oh, no. I get that. But the fact is you have one thing that can print off your Mickey.
Oh, you mean if it breaks down or something?
Did you bring it? Right. Like you have one of these. And I'm not going to say, again, I'll suspend disbelief and say that logistics had it covered and they had a bunch of, techs engineers that we already established had techs engineers and mechanics. I'm just going to assume that they had a bunch of parts to where they could do a full rebuild if necessary. Right. I just found it very interesting that they had one. They're like, this is what we got. So if something happens to it while Mickey's out in the field and he comes and he dies out there, that's our last Mickey.
I heard a comment made that this is one ship. Did they send out numerous ships? I think I remember.
My understanding was my understanding that this was another colonization.
Okay, so they're just kind of throwing darts all over the place, trying to hope. Maybe they didn't have a planet in mind. They're just going out, kind of Star Trek style,
Yeah.
trying to find something. Okay. So yeah, we meet Mickey 18. He is a more rebellious Mickey. He's one that is kind of tired of all the shit that they're dealing with, whether it being exploited, taken advantage of, what have you. And 17 meets him in his bed, and they're concerned, or well, 17's concerned because he's under the knowledge that multiples are not allowed, and so they're going to die. And what happens from that? We get the girlfriend Nasha. She ends up she's been sleeping with Mickey 18 and everything, and this is very upsetting to Mickey 17, which I actually really appreciated. It seems like this is the first time we've seen something light a fire under 17's ass, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I guess I appreciated it from like the love standpoint, right? It's even this idiot is capable of loving and is capable of recognizing jealousy, or at least feeling jealousy, even if it's his own self, so to speak. I don't know. There was something about it that resonated and really felt nice. That's like, cool. Here's something out there in the world that can even get this guy who doesn't care if he lives or dies, it would seem, to kind of change his perspective and behavior a little bit.
I agree with that. That was the one time where you actually saw him get charged.
And so before we delve into some stuff, let's talk a little bit about the commander of this ship, he and his wife.
Marshall.
So this is, Kenneth Marshall. I forget his wife's name, but
Ilfa.
it's played Ilfa.
Yeah.
Ilfa. And so Mark Ruffalo is playing this character. And James, what did you say you thought the character reminded you of? Because I was trying to think, is like, who does this look like to me? I swear I've seen this before. It wasn't like a Godfather type thing with the, the cotton in the mouth. I was thinking, maybe is it Elvis Presley that this character is reminded, like the prosthetics in the mouth and everything. Like, what is going on here?
The televangelist. Who was that famous televangelist from back in the day? Another caricature that you could put that is in current media right now is the Righteous Gemstones, Walton Goggins and Danny McBride's character, the big hair, the pompous smile, the over the top antics. And if I remember correctly, in this movie, he is a televangelist that ran for office. So he's quite literally a caricature of televangelist. Because if we remember, or if you recall in the film, there's the overt Christianity in this I guess I would call it a charade of wholesomeness and purity, and they keep talking about purity, but you come to find out with this Kenneth Marshall guy that what he's really talking to is more symbolic of racism and more akin to Hitler's
a eugenics type
grand
of thing.
eugenics program.
I think that's what they were trying. I don't know. I could see where that's maybe kind of what they were trying to play with a little bit there. And I don't know how much of it is they did a good job with that, or it's just we as a society, at least here in the States, we're used to that type of rhetoric. And so our minds naturally just go down that pathway. What were your thoughts on that? Because, like, again, there was nothing overtly within the show, or even subvertly, really, in the movie that necessarily made me think eugenics or anything else. I mean, you've got a diverse number of people in here, whether it's race, sexual orientation, whatever. He doesn't seem to treat the only person who gets treated poorly on this ship is Mickey.
Well, I disagree with that, because if you remember, he always talks about purity, and let's go to the point where he cuts the rock, the massive, what turns out to be a black diamond, right? He cuts the black diamond, and remember, he says, the first colony, or the first whatever, the first generation of the colony of Niflheim, you'll be there, and I'll be there, and you'll be there. And then remember, once he gets them into the fervor and everybody's cheering and loud, he says, almost all of you will have your names inscribed here. And if you remember right, he calls the girl in for the dinner with Mickey, and he
Yeah.
gets into the whole creepy,
Kind of
you're
talks about her being a breeding
perfect,
cow,
right, you're
right?
a perfect specimen. And then at the beginning of the voyage, they do the whole caloric ban on sex, even though there is a direct. He speaks about the what was it, the sexpedition,
He said they were going to have,
etc.
sexual revolution, sexual explosion whenever they get there. But see, he's also complimenting Nasha, the security guard, whenever she kind of speaks up and everything. It's like, you're our top person. Like, I don't know. I didn't really
Well,
see it
and remember
all that
most
much.
of remember most of his any type of overtures towards people that are most of the time it's towards women. With the men, he's usually just dismissive. The only one that he really kind of placates to, in my opinion, is his personal assistant, the head science guy.
Yeah, not to say he doesn't treat people in a somewhat shitty way, but I mean, none of it ever seems to come off in a, I don't know, in a racist manner, or
You can be
maybe some.
No,
egalitarian without
I don't
basing
think
it on
I don't.
race.
Yeah, I don't think it's racial. I think it's
But that's what I mean. What's he delineating by then? Intellectualism,
well, he's yeah,
disability.
genetics and intelligence. That's why there's people on, and I think that's the image. They're trying to make him this grotesque exploiter of his power and influence and wealth, to show that, yeah, he brought all these people to do the colonizing, but his goal is to create this allegedly genetically pure and perfect society, and he sees himself as the figurehead of it, that will be the primary breeding bull, or the sire of this new planet
Yeah.
colonization.
See, I
That's what it
thought
came off to
though,
me as.
Sorry, go ahead,
I
James.
kind of saw him as a puppet because he was not well respected on Earth. He doesn't seem particularly bright and whatnot. So what do you do with a useful idiot? Well, you tell him, hey man, you're going to be the king of the aeronauts and go to this new planet where you are going to rule and restart everything, and it's only the best of the best of the best. So now he is egalitarian because only the absolute genetic best has come along, and I'm the king, I'm the leader of this stuff. And remember, because they were talking when he first went into that committee, and they're like, well, no, you're here because you lost your bid for election. And yeah, whatever. So I'm happy to be the leader here. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
just completely delusional.
They're trying to just get
And
him out of the way.
right, so they make him a useful idiot, put him up as the figurehead, and send him off. But then they, him and his little Himmler guy, the guy with the glasses and the camera,
Yeah.
they're always talking, and it's the church, the business, the corporation, the church, the corporation, so obviously it's a corporate church, but there's your, and the whole way he presents with the singing and this kind of religious overture stuff. That's where I get that. That's where I get the televangelist thing from.
That's what I said.
That
He
makes
is a
sense.
And
he is a
then
televangelist.
he looks like, to me, with the facial expressions and the other stuff, a whole lot like Rick Moranis from Spaceballs.
Yeah, a little bit. I feel that now thinking about it a little bit, it is a good representation of our political class, I would say. Actually, maybe not so much useful idiot, more so failing upwards, right? Are they just trying to get him out of the way or anything like that, or is it just he's part of this class and so he gets this whole new thing, even though he is a complete failure, right? Yeah, we're just going to promote you again and promote you again. I mean, if we haven't seen that in our recent
Well, if I had to pick
political
a
aspect.
single actual person from from contemporary life that I would most liken him to, it would be Hunter Biden. He's got no real useful skills, no charisma, no this or that. So as Steven says, instead of getting rid of him, they fail him upward. And you know what, man, you're doing such a fantastic job. We're going to send you off planet. That's how good you are.
Yeah. Well, and so part of his persona too. We've mentioned it a little bit, but Yelfa, his wife, right? She seems to be a big influence. Now, I would not say that she's calling the shots, right? For a variety of reasons, I would say she's not calling the shots, but she's definitely a huge influence, and he listens to her. Um, I'm curious. I've got to go off on a tangent here for a second. What in the world is with the whole sauce thing? They make such a big deal about this sauce, right? So the wife and honestly a few of the people, they're obsessed with sauces, right? And it doesn't seem to ever play out to mean anything or relate to anything. I don't know if this is some bizarre thing with the directors, the writers, the executive producer. I don't know where this comes from, but did you guys pick up on anything? Am I missing something whenever it comes to these freaking sauces?
No,
Yeah, me
I think
personally,
they threw it in there and just never went anywhere with it.
I think the only thing I got from it, if you remember his dream at the end, um, and again, I feel like I think her name's Toni Collette. I believe that's the actress's name that played her. She's a really good actress, and I feel like she was wasted in this part. But when he has the dream at the end where he finds her to be printing off a new Kenneth Marshall, and she's the sauce that's on the ground, and she says, a cretin like you. I think it was really just used as a really shit metaphor within the film, a physical metaphor within the film, to delineate class from the plebeians, the peasantry,
Right.
the
This is supposed to
insignificance.
be the thing that we have, but you can't have, right?
Right, and
Or
look
they
at the
could have done it with real food or something as opposed to
yeah.
this. Like,
Well, and if you look at well, I think that kind of if we're gonna break this down again, it's getting really nitpicky and try to find stuff. But look at the stuff that I don't recall them ever getting anything besides that shit that was extruded out of the, industrial caulking gun onto his plate. I don't recall anything really liquid being on their plates, whether it be soup, a gravy, anything like that. It was all either crumbly solids, printed meats, or that extruded paste type goo. Whereas Kenneth Marshall and them, they have all the best printed meats and stuff and sauces.
yeah.
Which I'm assuming probably uses water. Maybe I don't know what the sauces were about, but that's the only thing I could glean from it was it's just trying to delineate between class.
Well, any more thoughts there on our fearless leader, Marshall, or his wife, or anything else onto that?
What is it with rulers, be they rulers of organized crime families or rulers of space expeditions, all being inherently inept lately in movies and whatnot?
Uh,
I think that's just really good social commentary because I think that's what the mass. I think on either side of it, I don't try to feed it. I just try to enjoy this movie as a movie, and I'll give my final opinions on that. But I think honestly, why we're seeing all this inept leadership is because I think that's what people on either side of the fence, whether you're left, right, middle, we all see it, and you can't gild the lily any longer. Leadership in our countries, it's inept. It's terrible. Like Stevens talked about, the failing upward so long as you're a party yes man, uh, et cetera, et cetera. And another thing about Kenneth Marshall, something interesting. Yeah, he's a televangelist, but I recall he was a failed politician turned televangelist. So I thought that was a very interesting social commentary as well, because you have political sycophants, you have religious sycophants, et cetera, et cetera. He failed in one arena, but he used his even though he may be inept, whatever, he's got the charisma, the what have you, to bring on an audience. So he's like, okay, if I can't make it shuffle within the halls of Congress or whatever the committee, whatever they were called at that time, for the movie, what he was capable of doing was switching the milieu of the sycophants he was going after, and he got them to the point where he was able to lead an expedition and be trusted to, do that.
Which I think is more so a commentary that, and I even in real life, is a commentary, more so a judgment on the populace, not the individual leader.
Yeah.
Right. If you're dumb enough to follow this, if you're dumb enough to elect this, if you're dumb, like it takes all of you to promote that person. With that said, you mentioned the idea that, yeah, right. So you could see this from any political viewpoint and believe it's either representative of the other party or the other position's leader, right? This is the
Or all of it. Right.
I think that's definitely part of it. I think another aspect, though, is writers nowadays. Everybody's so nihilistic, right? So this is why we don't get good leadership, is because their outlook on the world is this pointless. Why are we here? There's no point in even living. Pessimism, nihilism take on the world, which is why they can't write uplifting characters. They can't write characters that we can get behind, because they don't believe in it and they're not familiar with it, I would say. So I think that's part of where the ineptitude comes from.
I agree.
So I'm
sorry. I know you want to continue, but one last thing about Kenneth Marshall. I remember earlier you said that people were stating that Marshall was a caricature of Trump, correct?
Yeah, that's what they were trying to get.
Okay.
I wasn't able to see it at all.
The one thing I did find funny, I don't know if you guys noticed it though, but remember when they were in the line to go to colonize and they were showing all of his sycophantic fans? Did you notice that they were red hats?
I think it's stuff like that where they try and go with it.
Well, I was thinking back. The only thing I could think that they would get it, besides, a lot of people view Trump as a buffoon or what have you, so you can read into it and see whoever you want. But I did find it funny that they picked red hats to show the people that follow the buffoon leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it was all this, right?
Right.
All these people, and
they could.
They're fat,
and the thing
they're idiots. They're wearing pictures of them.
Yep. And the thing that I don't get is if this isn't, and this is where I was talking to Dad earlier, and I said to give a critical review on this, I find it hard not to say that the movie is kind of just espousing what we've heard a lot of from the left for a long time, just spattered around and kind of heavy fisted at times with like that. The all red, they're fat, they're dumb, they follow the buffoon. What have you. And my thing is if it was just supposed to be a sci-fi film, a dark, irreverent, black comedy, whatever, it's the future. Why couldn't it have been purple?
Right.
Make it blue and red mixed to show that like it's a complete wash, fellas. Like this is the future across the board.
Well, that's the thing is don't get me wrong. I 100% believe that the writers, producers, everybody else, they probably were going for something like that, maybe, right? Don't get me wrong. Like we see it all over. That's why Hollywood's failing. That being said, critiquing the film, I don't see it. So I'm not going to read into it as if I do see it. I'm not going to make something up in my mind, even if I believe that maybe they wanted to try and go that route. I'm sure that that's kind of where their belief structure might be. Fact of the matter is it didn't come through in the film for me, at least.
Right.
And I, we're all very sensitive to that stuff now, right?
Yeah,
we're very sensitive.
That's the thing. I'm at least able to watch the movie without it, affecting my ability to watch the movie.
Right. So we get to this point then in the movie where this is kind of getting into the third act, where there are the two Mickeys. We've got the exposure now to the creatures on the planet. Marshall finds out about it. They're wanting to execute both the Mickeys, but the creatures are now surrounding the ship because there are a couple of the creatures on the ship. As you had mentioned, there was this rock that they had cut into, and there were some creatures there. Mickey 18 had tried to assassinate Marshall during that whole chaotic scene, and the hive mind creatures are now surrounding the ship. They haven't attacked it yet, but they're definitely capable of doing so. And in the midst of all that, we're dealing with this multiples issue. So what was decided here? They ultimately, what did they decide? They put a couple of bombs on both of the Mickeys, and they were sending them out to not negotiate with the creatures. What were they originally sent out to do?
They were supposed to go out and collect 100 tails
Well, that wasn't the only thing. That was just a request from Ilfa, and whoever
Yeah.
collected them first would supposedly get to live, even though everybody knew and they showed on screen that Ilfa and Marshall planned to kill them regardless. No, the primary objective of it was, yes, to potentially go out and speak, or excuse me, from the science perspective, the one female you spoke about earlier was to go out and try to see if the translator worked, but the mission they were sent on is they were strapped with the Arcady 3.0, which was the nerve gas that was tested and perfected on Mickey
Mm,
during their trip to Niflheim. And what was supposed to happen was they were going to go out, collect the tails, whatever, get close to, draw as many of them in by attacking them and making them swarm onto them, and get close to the mama or whatever before you do it, and then they were going to detonate.
right. Okay. Now remind me, isn't Niflheim? Isn't that a Nordic
Nif Yes, Niflheim's from Norse
Norse
mythology, and it's the
mythology? Right.
cold, dark world that's inhabited by the Jotnar or the frost giants. It's
Okay, that's
the
the frost
opposite.
giant one. Got it.
Yeah, it's the opposite of
No, that's
Muspelheim.
Jotunheim.
Well, Jotunheim is the land of giants, but Niflheim is the cold, dark, uninhabited planet that's inhabited. Oh yeah. You're right. Jotunheim is the frost giant planet. Niflheim is just a cold, dark, uninhabited hellscape with some form of
Wasteland.
dwarven creature, dark elf type creature, if I remember right. But yeah, it doesn't matter. It's cold, dark, and desolate.
Okay, so we've got these two guys now going out there. They do end up being able to communicate with the creatures, and I'll have to look it up. I'm pretty sure that the voiceover for the audio for the main mother is that chick. She's been in quite a lot of things lately, but she sounds like she smoked like 30 packs a day.
Hmm.
She does have a good voice for some of these types of things, but in any case, yeah, they're able to communicate actually with the creatures, and Marshall and his ilk do not appreciate that they're negotiating, it would seem, on behalf of them
Mankind.
for ego reasons, along with probably a few other reasons. And so they decide that they're going to go out and communicate and negotiate on behalf of mankind, or person kind, as Yelfa even herself corrected, because again,
Yeah.
meta type stuff. But um, anywho, during all this time, right, Nasha, the girlfriend, she's tied up and everything. We've got the baby hanging over the pit of despair, going to be incinerated. And the mother says, "What? Basically, we kill all of you. If you give us back our baby, I forget its name, then we'll spare you, basically." And so he makes the code
Zoko.
symbol for their sexual code symbol for bring the baby, I think is what it was called.
C3.
And C3, yeah, C3, bring the baby. And Nasha finds a way to kind of kick off events to be able to do such a thing. So Marshall and a few others are now out in the field traveling toward Mickey and them, correct? And their intent, I think, was to blow them up or something while they were out there, right? Because doesn't the mother pick up on this, and that's why they create the swarm of three? It's a shell
One.
game now.
No. They didn't sense it with Mickey, because remember, Mickey and them were speaking to them, and they had basically parlayed and figured out, okay, we get the baby back, you guys won't absolutely destroy us. If you remember, they went into the swarm formations when the big vehicles that were carrying Marshall to come out and where he could give his speech before they did their detonation. That's when they took off, because they sensed that the dude was aiming the thing at him, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's
They
what I mean. Marshall and them, they were out there heading toward
Yeah,
the big
right.
one to
That
kill it.
that's when they
Yeah.
showed up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Marshall's
you know,
agenda was to go out and make a film that they could send back to Earth,
Yeah.
showing him give his big speech to the defeated native creatures. Then they were going to seal themselves in the vehicle, detonate the Mickeys, and release the nerve gas.
Oh, Dad, you talked about him being, yeah, you're right. And you talked about him being a puppet. You said his agenda. And something I'd like to point out, it really wasn't his agenda. I think if anybody was the wheels behind him, if he was a puppet, it was that he wasn't androgynous, because it's obviously a guy, but the they them, labrae piercing, glasses with the semi-translucent two-tone, whatever. The bald
Yeah, this
guy that
fella
was
here.
him.
Yeah, the little
Right.
Himmler representative.
Exactly,
I
that
think
guy.
he'd
Like,
probably be more what Goebbels.
yeah, propaganda minister.
Yeah.
Right, that guy. But if anybody's I guess the person steering this ship, if he is just a puppet for a greater agenda of people that are coming after him, that's the guy.
Yeah, it's the state that's really in control, and
Yeah.
he's the intelligent one that actually understands. He's the bureaucrat. He's the deep state.
Yeah, he's the one that
He's
helps
the
create the
unelected
videos.
official. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Ilfa's there to do the emotional moderation for the ridiculously overconfident buffoon who listens to his hot wife.
Well, see, I mean, yeah, I agree. I guess with the Yelfa aspect, I think she's useful in that. But again, to me, she's not. She's a diehard of Marshall.
Yeah, true.
I think that she is subservient to Marshall, but she's helpful to him because he's an idiot.
Right, and I agree. I think, well, that's my thing. I think she is truly the emotional moderation for him. I do agree that she's a 100% sycophant of Marshall as well, but I think she's, like you said, intelligent enough and clear-headed enough to see that she wants to preserve her lifestyle and see that lifestyle increase in terms of her power, reach, and influence through Marshall. That she's the one that keeps him grounded when his baser instincts and idiocy are about to get the better of him.
Right.
She uses her feminine wiles to calm down the brutish idiot. And again, if we want to take it meta and see if they're speaking about something, maybe that's what the feminine blah 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 does. But the feminist question is dichotomous at best.
So ultimately, the film ends with Mickey 18 sacrificing himself, pressing the 18 button, blowing himself up, getting rid of Marshall, getting rid of the bombs. Basically, they get the kid back, the baby tardigrade, back to the rest of the troop, the tribe, what have you, and yeah, that's kind of where the film ends. I mean, there's a few things afterward, but overall, not that important unless I missed something that I'm not thinking about. So, for you guys, I mean, what's your overall take on the film? Where do you rate it out of 10? Do you recommend it? Where do you stand, particularly from a sci-fi standpoint and everything, sci-fi action comedy type of thing? Actually, well, I wouldn't say action, sci-fi comedy type of thing.
I will go with a very strong 7. I enjoyed it. I would recommend people watch it. If you're watching it for sci-fi, you're probably going to be disappointed. If you're watching it for political satire, you're probably going to be disappointed. But if you're watching it just to watch a movie that has a lot of fun, silliness, and a decent level of plot, then yeah, it's great. I think it could be a little shorter, but yeah, I think 7 is fair.
What about you, J3?
That's exactly where I wound up. I said pretty much the exact same thing to Dad earlier. It's not, in my opinion, intelligent enough to be a biting political satire. It's not sci-fi enough to be a compelling sci-fi. It doesn't delve into the existential or philosophical questions that the premise raise enough to make it a drama or anything. But as a standalone, just movie that has little bits of all of that, it's a comedy based on sci-fi, based on whatever. As a movie, yeah, I think it's worth watching. I don't think I'm going to jump into it to watch it again all of a sudden, but it's definitely worth watching. And I can see how you could read into it that it's a commentation on this, a commentary on that, and you're more than entitled to that opinion. But just as a standalone movie, it's worth watching. You can separate that from it.
It's interesting you guys say that because, as you can see right here, I myself gave it a 7 actually after the first time I watched it. So I'm in agreement with you. It's not high sci-fi or anything like that. It's a dumb fun type of movie that it gets you thinking a little bit, as obviously an hour long commentary on it proves. But yeah, it's worth watching. It's good, decent amount of fun. It wasn't woke, as they say, at least from my standpoint. So it didn't take me out of it for any of those reasons.
Yeah, I
I
don't
thought
believe
all
it
the
was a woke
characters were
film.
pretty good. The acting I thought was great. I don't like Mark Ruffalo, for example, as a person, but I think he's a great actor. Same thing. Well, not same thing. Robert Pattinson, I have no bearings whatsoever. I thought he did a great job in this. Particularly, it's interesting. I think it's pretty difficult sometimes for actors, especially in the new age with green screens and all that, but to be able to portray two versions of yourself talking to one another. Phenomenal job, man. It's a pretty hard thing to pull off. I mean, I think acting in general is pretty difficult to pull off, let alone when you're having commentary and reacting and stuff to yourself. So hats off to him for that. And yeah, I thought it was a good movie. 7 out of 10. Give it a watch if you haven't seen it. And I guess we'll leave it at that unless you guys have any final thoughts on it.
I won't put anything on the film, but I like the fact you pointed out how hard it is to do that very thing, an actor playing two parts in the same film.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check that out. All right. Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you on the next review. All right.